The intergalactic council chamber buzzed with activity. It was an enormous hall with high vaulted ceilings, and hundreds of species from across the universe were seated in the bleachers, watching the demonstration below. The floor was covered in smooth, dark metal tiles, and large screens hovered overhead, broadcasting the event for everyone to see. Aliens from all walks of life had gathered to witness something they were certain would be nothing more than a show, a joke. Humans, despite their intelligence, were still considered an inferior species by the galactic powers. They had no fleets that could rival the larger species, no weapons that were considered truly dangerous. Their technology was laughable compared to that of the more advanced alien races. And their warriors? Well, they were nothing to write home about. Captain Damon Wells had heard it all before. He had been on the receiving end of the aliens' dismissive laughter on countless occasions. In this grand arena, Damon would face them once more. Standing at the edge of the arena, Damon looked out at the sea of alien faces. His heart didn't race. His pulse didn't quicken. He had faced far worse than this. Wars with enemies far stronger, and environments far harsher than anything this council could throw at him. Yet the air in the chamber felt thick, suffocating, as if the weight of centuries of scorn rested upon his shoulders. Damon wore his signature battle armor, its surface battered and scratched from countless battles. The armor looked ancient, worn out, with visible dents and cracks across the chest plate. It wasn't the clean, shiny, advanced tech that the other races wore. No, this was human. It was functional, sturdy, and made to survive against all odds. Still, it didn't look impressive by alien standards. The armor was old, rough, and most definitely not sleek. Above him, the alien council snickered, their voices laced with disbelief. One of the leaders, a reptilian creature with golden scales, leaned toward his fellow council members. "This is the great human warrior?" he said with a mocking tone, a broken-down suit of armor, and a laughable appearance. The comment sent ripples of laughter through the crowd. Damon's stance remained unwavering. His gaze never wavered from the center of the arena, where the challenges would take place. He had been through too much to let a few words affect him now, yet inside he could feel a flicker of determination burn brighter than before. "I don't care what they think," he muttered under his breath, almost as if reminding himself, "Well, I've never cared." As Damon took his first step into the arena, the mocking laughter didn't die down. In fact, it seemed to grow louder. The aliens had no respect for the human race, and this display would only prove that their belief was correct. They were convinced that Damon, and by extension humanity, were nothing but weaklings pretending to be warriors. They had never seen anything truly dangerous from humans. They had no idea what Damon was capable of. At the center of the arena, Damon saw his opponent, a towering alien gladiator, a massive figure with rippling muscles and thick red skin. It was a creature that had destroyed entire cities with a single blow, and now it was being sent to crush this so-called human. The alien's eyes gleamed with cruelty and arrogance. He stepped forward, his claws scraping the metal floor with each step. The council fell silent as the gladiator flexed his muscles, preparing for the fight. The crowd's anticipation built with every passing second. They were all eager to see Damon crushed under the weight of the alien's strength. Damon, however, stood still. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise a hand. The only thing he did was adjust the straps on his worn armor, as if he were preparing for any other battle he'd fought before. The alien gladiator bared its teeth, its lips curling into a snarl. "This will be quick," it hissed, its voice a low growl that reverberated through the arena. Damon said nothing. He wasn't concerned. He had been in battles far worse than this one. He had been thrown into situations where the odds were stacked against him. He had fought against enemies much stronger, much faster, and yet, here he stood. The bell rang. The alien lunged at Damon with startling speed. Its claws aimed straight for his chest, intending to tear through his armor like paper. The crowd gasped in unison as the gladiator closed the distance in an instant, its massive hand reaching for Damon's chest. But Damon wasn't there. In a fluid motion, he sidestepped, his armor creaking slightly as he moved. He was fast. Too fast for the massive gladiator to track. The alien's claws sliced through the air where Damon had been standing. But by the time it realized its mistake, Damon had already ducked under its arm and brought his knee up into the alien's gut. The gladiator stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt. But Damon's attack was only a warm-up. He pressed his advantage immediately, landing a series of quick, precise strikes to the alien's ribs. The gladiator roared in fury, its eyes flashing with anger. It swung its massive fist at Damon, but the human captain ducked low and rolled out of the way, moving with an agility that no one in the council expected. A moment of stunned silence swept through the arena. The alien warriors, who had watched countless battles, couldn't believe their eyes. This human, with his cracked armor and unassuming stance, was dodging and striking with a level of skill they hadn't expected. The gladiator was fast, but Damon was faster. The human had found a rhythm, something primal, something born of desperation and survival. The laughter of the council quieted, replaced by murmurs of disbelief. Damon's movements were like a dance, each strike, each dodge, calculated and efficient. The gladiator was beginning to tire. It could no longer land a hit, no matter how hard it tried. Every time its claws reached out, Damon was already somewhere else, his movements quick and precise. The alien roared again, this time charging full force, hoping to catch Damon off guard. The gladiator's fist slammed down toward the ground where Damon had just been, but the human was already behind it. He grabbed the alien's arm and used its momentum against it, throwing the gladiator to the ground with a practiced move. The alien was stunned, but Damon wasn't finished. He didn't give the gladiator time to recover. With a swift kick, Damon knocked the alien's legs out from under it, sending the creature sprawling across the arena floor. The crowd went silent. The alien, who had been expected to wipe the floor with Damon, was lying defeated. The gladiator growled, but Damon wasn't looking at it anymore. He was looking at the council. The alien leader, the one who had mocked him just moments before, had gone quiet. His golden scales shimmered under the lights of the arena, but there was no smirk on his face. No mocking chuckle, just stunned silence. Damon stood there, breathing heavily but resolute. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, his cracked armor still holding strong. His face remained calm, showing no signs of exhaustion. For the first time, he allowed himself a small smile. The battle wasn't over, but the joke, the one that the aliens had made about his armor, was no longer funny. Damon's next words were simple, but they were all that was needed. "I told you," he said. "You have no idea what's inside this armor." The arena was silent now, the shock from Damon's unexpected skill still hanging in the air. His chest rose and fell with deep, steady breaths, his eyes fixed on the gladiator now slowly rising to its feet. The alien warrior was no longer roaring with arrogance, no longer taunting the human warrior. It was merely calculating its next move, something Damon had already anticipated. The alien stood up straight, its massive red body shifting awkwardly. Its claws scraped against the floor as it regained its footing, but the creature's movements were slower now. It wasn't just the physical exertion of the fight. It was something deeper. The realization had set in. This human wasn't just a joke. This human was a real threat. Damon's gaze flickered to the council. He could feel their eyes on him, their disbelief now palpable. The reptilian leader, who had mocked him the most, leaned forward in his seat, whispering something to the other council members. Damon didn't care what they were saying. He didn't need to hear it. The only thing that mattered was the gladiator in front of him and how he would finish what he had started. The alien's chest rose and fell with labored breaths, and for the first time, it hesitated. It wasn't used to fighting something that could withstand its blows. Normally, when a gladiator like this one fought, it was a display of overwhelming strength and speed. No one ever lasted this long, especially not a human. The creature's eyes narrowed. It had fought for centuries, seen countless enemies fall before it. But now it found itself at a loss. Damon was different. The gladiator lunged again, this time with more calculated precision. It swung its massive fist in a wide arc, hoping to crush Damon with sheer force. But Damon was already moving. His movements were smooth, fluid, each step intentional. As the alien's fist swung toward him, Damon ducked and rolled to the side, coming up behind the gladiator in one swift motion. He didn't hesitate. His fist connected with the back of the alien's knee, sending a sharp shock of pain through the creature's leg. The gladiator stumbled forward, its balance momentarily thrown off. Damon didn't give it the time to recover. He quickly closed the distance, driving his knee into the alien's side with all his strength. The blow landed hard, and the gladiator let out a grunt, its body jerking with the impact. The crowd began to murmur, and Damon could hear the surprise building. He could feel the energy shifting in the arena. The laughter was gone now, replaced by an uneasy silence. The alien warriors who had been so confident in the beginning were now watching with rapt attention. The human was no longer the underdog. He was the one in control. The gladiator, however, was not finished. With a growl, it spun around and swung its massive claw toward Damon's head. The force behind the strike was enough to tear through metal, but Damon was faster. He ducked under the blow just in time, his body narrowly avoiding the sharp claws. He countered with a quick strike to the alien's abdomen, pushing it backward once again. For the first time, the gladiator faltered. The blow had landed deep, and the creature staggered, its once pristine confidence slipping. Damon's relentless strikes had left it winded, but more importantly, they had left it with a question. How could a human, with such apparent weakness, land blow after blow like this? How could this tiny, insignificant species keep up with one of the most feared gladiators in the galaxy? The alien leader shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Damon's relentless assault was not what he had expected. No one had expected this. The human's moves were calculated, practiced. Every strike, every dodge, seemed to be executed with the precision of someone who had trained for years, not just for the sake of winning, but for the sake of survival. The alien leader exchanged a glance with his colleagues. Their expressions were a mixture of surprise and unease. They had underestimated this human, and now they were beginning to see the error of their judgment. Damon didn't stop. His eyes were locked onto the gladiator, his every muscle focused on the fight ahead. He had been in worse situations before, but this one felt different. The adrenaline coursed through him, and the thrill of the battle pushed him forward. He was no longer thinking about the council, about the mocking faces that had laughed at him. He was thinking about survival, his own and humanity's. The gladiator's moves became more desperate now, its attacks less controlled. It was angered, confused, and most importantly, it was starting to realize it might not win this fight. Damon, on the other hand, was calm. He had been here before, in battles where the odds were stacked against him, in wars that had seemed impossible to win. He had learned long ago to never underestimate himself, and to never underestimate his ability to adapt. With a sudden burst of energy, the gladiator charged at Damon, aiming for a crushing blow that would surely end the fight. But Damon was ready. He anticipated the attack and sidestepped at the last moment, causing the gladiator to crash into the arena's edge. The alien's body slammed into the ground with a deafening thud, sending a shockwave through the arena. For a moment, everything was still. The gladiator was down. The council was silent. Damon stood tall, his chest heaving with each breath. His armor battered, but still intact. The gladiator was breathing heavily on the floor, struggling to rise. It wasn't defeated. Not yet, but it was on the edge. Damon knew that this fight was almost over. He could end it now if he wanted to, but he didn't. Not yet. The gladiator looked up, its eyes narrowing with a mix of fear and anger. It had underestimated Damon from the start. And now they could see the truth. The human wasn't just a fighter. He was a warrior in every sense of the word. The gladiator knew that, and the council knew it too. Damon took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving the alien. The gladiator struggled to get back to its feet, but it was slow, its movements sluggish. Damon could see it was running out of steam. And that was when he knew the battle was his. Without a word, Damon moved in, his steps measured and confident. As the gladiator reached out for him with one final desperate swipe, Damon grabbed its wrist and twisted. He used the alien's own momentum against it, forcing it to the ground with a single fluid motion. The gladiator let out a strained hiss, its claws scraping the metal floor as it tried to push itself up, but Damon wasn't giving it the chance. He moved quickly, pressing the heel of his boot into the alien's chest, forcing it to the ground. The gladiator let out a final, defeated groan as Damon stood over it, his chest still heaving from the exertion of the fight. The crowd watched in stunned silence, the once laughing faces now frozen in shock. The sound of Damon's steady breathing was the only thing that filled the arena. Damon looked up, his eyes scanning the council. The reptilian leader was watching him closely, its golden eyes flicking between him and the defeated gladiator. The leader's lips twitched as if it were struggling to process what had just happened. With one last glance at the alien on the ground, Damon straightened his back and spoke, his voice calm but carrying the weight of 100 battles. "Don't underestimate humans," he said, his tone low but firm. "We fight with everything we have, and we don't quit." For a moment there was no response. The council remained silent, still processing the fight they had just witnessed. The gladiator, once the proudest of warriors, lay on the floor, unable to stand. And then, slowly, the murmurs began. First from a few, then from many. The realization was setting in. The human was not just another soldier. He was something more. He was a force to be reckoned with. Damon had won. But the battle for respect, humanity's place among the stars, had just begun. The silence that followed Damon's victory felt almost oppressive. The alien gladiator, once a fierce and confident warrior, now lay defeated on the floor of the arena. Its massive form, now lying in defeat, was a stark contrast to the image it had tried to project only moments before. An unstoppable force. But Damon, calm and resolute, had shattered that illusion. As Damon stood over the gladiator, his eyes scanned the alien's body, his breath slowing as the adrenaline began to fade. The fight had been intense, but now that it was over, he allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. He hadn't just fought the gladiator. He had fought the expectations of the galaxy, the centuries of ridicule that humanity had endured. His victory wasn't just physical, it was a statement. The gladiator groaned softly beneath him, struggling to push itself up. But Damon wasn't concerned with finishing it off. The fight was over. The gladiator had been humiliated, and there was no need for further violence. Damon didn't fight for bloodshed. He fought for respect. And he had earned it, not only from his opponent, but from the thousands of alien eyes now watching him, stunned into silence. The alien leader, the one who had mocked him earlier, remained seated, his golden eyes fixed on Damon. The leader's expression was unreadable, his features rigid, but Damon could sense the shift in energy. The reptilian leader had no words to express what was happening, what had just happened. But Damon could see the flicker of realization. It was in the way the leader's posture changed, the way the other members of the council looked between each other. They were starting to understand that humanity wasn't what they had assumed. Damon took a step back from the gladiator, his feet still planted firmly on the floor. He didn't need to be a hero. He didn't need anyone to cheer for him. All that mattered was the message his actions had sent. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not to be laughed at. The gladiator, still struggling to rise, finally managed to push itself up onto one knee, its alien eyes locked onto Damon. But this time, There was no arrogance, no smugness. There was only a quiet understanding. Damon had done the impossible, and the gladiator knew it. Damon didn't look at it again. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the council, his eyes steady, unflinching. He stood tall, his battered armor a testament to his resilience, not his weakness. He wasn't just standing for himself now. He was standing for every human who had ever been underestimated, every human who had ever been laughed at. The council members began to murmur among themselves. Damon couldn't make out the words, but he didn't need to. He could feel the shift in the air. He could feel the tension, the realization that humanity had just proven its worth in the most definitive way possible. For the first time, humans weren't just a side note in the history of the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with. The reptilian leader stood up slowly, his tall form towering over Damon. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he looked down at Damon, his golden eyes narrowing, as though trying to decipher the human before him. Damon didn't flinch. He knew what was coming. The alien leader's gaze softened slightly, and a subtle nod of recognition passed between them. "You have proven yourself, human," the reptilian leader said finally, his voice deep and gravelly. "We have underestimated you." Damon didn't respond. He didn't need to. The words spoken by the leader were all that needed to be said. The council had witnessed humanity's strength, and now they had to come to terms with it. The leader turned to the other council members, his voice now commanding. "This human," he said, "has shown the galaxy what it means to fight with honor, with skill, and with courage. We have always seen you as weak, as beneath us. But now we see that humanity is not to be dismissed so easily." The words were like a quiet explosion in the room. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging uncertain glances. It was as if the ground had been pulled out from under them. They had always assumed their place at the top of the galactic hierarchy was unchallenged, but Damon had just shattered that illusion in a single moment. The murmurs grew louder, and Damon could hear the subtle changes in the voices around him. It wasn't just surprise, it was respect, deep, unspoken respect. It was a shift that Damon had never expected to come so quickly. The galaxy had watched him fight, watched him win. And now they had to reckon with what it meant for them. But Damon remained silent, waiting. He wasn't here for praise. He wasn't here for accolades. His victory had never been about proving anyone wrong. It had been about proving humanity's worth, to himself, to his species. The fact that the council was now starting to realize it was simply a consequence of his actions, not his goal. The alien leader raised a hand, calling for silence. The arena fell quiet again, the tension hanging thick in the air. For a moment, Damon thought the leader might speak again. But instead, he turned toward Damon, his golden eyes fixed on him once more. "Humanity is not weak," the leader declared, his voice now carrying weight. "And you are not alone. We will no longer dismiss you. You have earned your place in this galaxy, and I offer you the respect of our people." Damon nodded once, slowly, but didn't speak. The battle was over, and he didn't need to say anything more. His actions had done all the talking. His silence now was more powerful than any words he could have spoken. The gladiator, now fully upright, stood beside Damon, its eyes no longer filled with contempt. It looked at him with something different now, a kind of understanding. It was no longer an enemy to be feared, but an equal, someone who had proven himself worthy. Damon finally turned away from the council and made his way toward the edge of the arena. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the chamber, and for the first time, the once dismissive voices of the council began to quiet. The applause started slowly, almost tentatively, but it grew louder with each passing second. It wasn't the kind of applause Damon had expected. It wasn't for his strength or his skill. It was for his defiance, his determination, his refusal to back down. As he reached the edge of the arena, Damon stopped and looked out over the crowd. The aliens who had once mocked him now watched him with respect. And that was enough for him. He had proven that humanity was not to be underestimated, and that, more than anything, was a victory. He turned back once more, his gaze meeting that of the reptilian leader. The leader's eyes were still filled with awe, but there was no longer any mockery there. There was only a quiet, unspoken acknowledgement that humanity had earned its place. Damon nodded to him, a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and for the first time, humanity wasn't at the bottom of the hierarchy. It was standing shoulder to shoulder with the most powerful races in the universe. The gladiator, once a symbol of power, now stood quietly beside Damon. The alien's chest still rose and fell with each breath, but the anger was gone. It was replaced with something else, something Damon had always known. Respect, true respect. Damon smiled to himself, but it wasn't a smile of arrogance. It wasn't a smile of victory. It was a smile of quiet satisfaction. Humanity had proven its strength. And in the grand scheme of things, that was all that mattered. The arena was no longer filled with mockery or disbelief. The atmosphere had shifted. The sounds of Damon's victory echoed in the hearts of the alien council members, their pride and assumptions crushed under the weight of his performance. Damon stood quietly, his chest rising and falling steadily, his eyes scanning the crowd of alien faces. He had done what they thought impossible, and now the galaxy would never view humanity in the same way again. The reptilian leader who had once laughed at Damon's worn armor and dismissed him as a weakling stood tall at the front of the council, his golden eyes fixed on Damon. He wasn't smiling, but the respect in his gaze was undeniable. The aliens in the council had been quick to mock humanity's technology, its warriors. But Damon had changed that in a single moment. He had shown them that humanity was capable of greatness, that humanity was more than just a footnote in the galaxy's history. For the first time in his life, Damon didn't feel the weight of the ridicule. He didn't need anyone's approval or recognition. He had proved himself, and that was enough. Yet, as he stood there, he realized something he hadn't expected. He had earned something far more valuable than respect: humanity's place in the galaxy. The council members no longer saw him as the small human in the corner. They saw him as an equal. The alien leader stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Damon. There was a moment of silence before the leader finally spoke, his voice heavy with authority. And something else, something Damon hadn't expected: humility. "Human," the leader began, his voice strong yet tinged with a strange respect. "You have done what no one thought possible. You have proven that your species is not to be underestimated." Damon didn't respond. He simply nodded once, acknowledging the leader's words. He didn't need a lengthy speech or some form of grand declaration. The words were enough. The leader continued, his gaze sweeping over the council members who were now looking at Damon with new eyes. "We have long considered humans to be a lesser species, weak in comparison to the great races of the galaxy. We believed your strength to be a joke, but today you have proven that humans possess something that many of us do not: the ability to fight with honor, to rise above expectations, and to stand firm in the face of overwhelming odds." Damon's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but not out of anger. He wasn't angry anymore. He was content, satisfied with the truth that had been revealed. His victory was not about showing the aliens who was stronger. It was about showing them who humans truly were. And now they knew. The leader turned to the other council members who had remained silent throughout the exchange. Their eyes were wide, their expressions no longer filled with condescension, but with genuine acknowledgement. One by one, they nodded in agreement with the reptilian leader's words. The leader's voice grew louder as he addressed the entire council, the arena, and the audience that had gathered to witness this event. "This human has earned our respect. We, the greatest powers in the galaxy, must now recognize that humanity is no longer a species to be dismissed. You are a force to be reckoned with, and you deserve to be treated as such." Damon's gaze flickered over the council, and for the first time, he allowed himself a small smile. It wasn't a smile of triumph, but of quiet satisfaction. Humanity had proven its strength, not through violence, but through perseverance, skill, and honor. The leader raised his hand, signaling the end of the council's deliberations. The murmurs in the crowd began to quiet as the reptilian leader turned his attention back to Damon. "You have shown us something we did not expect, something we did not understand. Humanity is not weak. You are not weak. And for that, you have earned our respect." The council members all stood, one by one, and began to applaud. It was slow at first, almost hesitant, but it quickly grew louder. The applause was not just for Damon's victory in the arena, but for the message it carried. Humanity had proved its place among the stars. Damon didn't need the applause. He didn't want the attention. He simply turned and walked toward the edge of the arena, his boots echoing against the metal floor. As he reached the entrance, the gladiator he had defeated earlier stood up and walked toward him. The once mighty warrior who had sneered at him only moments ago now looked at him with a kind of silent respect. The gladiator didn't speak, but its eyes spoke volumes. Damon nodded once at the gladiator, acknowledging the silent understanding that had passed between them. The fight was over, and with it, the old grudges, the old assumptions, had been laid to rest. As Damon stepped out of the arena, he was met by a group of humans who had been watching from the stands. They had been silent spectators up until now, but as they saw Damon approach, they broke into applause. These were his people, his comrades, his brothers and sisters in arms. They had seen him fight, seen him struggle, and now they saw him stand, victorious. Damon smiled at them, but didn't stop. He didn't need their praise. What mattered was the victory he had secured for humanity. As he passed through the gates of the arena, his mind was already turning to the future. This was just the beginning. The galaxy had watched him fight, and now they had to reckon with the truth. Humanity was not to be underestimated. They had fought for their place in the stars, and they had earned it. Damon's steps were steady as he walked away from the arena, but his mind was filled with a quiet determination. He had won this battle, but there were more to come. The galaxy was vast, and humanity's journey had only just begun. The council had given their respect, but respect was not enough. Humanity would rise, not because it had been handed a place, but because it had earned it through every challenge, every victory, and every struggle. Damon had proven that the human spirit was not something to be dismissed. It was something to be reckoned with. And from that moment on, the galaxy would have to recognize humanity for what it was: strong, resilient, and capable of greatness. The applause still echoed in the arena behind him, but Damon didn't look back. His path was ahead of him, and the road to humanity's future was just beginning. The journey would be long and it would be hard, but Damon knew one thing for sure: humanity was ready.